So this isn't that show. This isn't the People's History of Horror. This is Blunt Talk. But last time I opened up by like, where's the first place you smoke weed and all that kind of shit. So this would be, what's the first movie you can remember watching ever?
The first movie I remember watching ever?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I can narrow it down and ask, like, what's the first horror movie you remember watching?
No. I mean, this is well before horror. Probably Land Before Time.
I mean, that's a good one. I'd probably have to say something like Pinocchio or one of the Disney movies, because we had all those movies growing up, and just, it was probably one of those. I watched a lot of those growing up.
All the older kids in the family liked Land Before Time, so it was on repeat. So that's the first one I really remember sitting down and watching.
I mean, as far as, like, actual solid memories of, like, you know, going to the movies might be different, but I do have a lot of memories of watching movies, so it could also be, like, Where the Red Fern Grows, or...
Classic.
Or something like that.
Shiloh.
I didn't really watch those movies until we read them in, I think it was like 3rd grade. My teacher, Miss Skibba, which is a weird name.
Random as fuck. That was my dad's favorite book.
I mean, it's a good one.
You know my dad. That's random, right?
I mean, it kind of makes sense. Like, he's the not quite a dick-ass Judd version.
Shiloh of Mice and Men.
Okay, that's an interesting combination, actually, but I can appreciate that. Well, I mean, basically that's what we're going to do here today. Like, we do have the other podcast where we talk about horror and stuff, and we've had some of this kind of discussion on this podcast, Blunt Talk. Mike, since we haven't introduced ourselves yet.
What, Aaron?
Yeah, there we go. Now our names are out there. Y'all know who we are. Basically, yeah, like, we'll just talk about the stuff we grew up with. We talked about the movies and horror side of things that we've grown up with, and we've talked about some of the...
Y'all know we're horror nerds. Like, everybody knows that.
So yeah, we're gonna obviously have that in this.
We're just nerds, and this is kind of talking about how and what got us into what we're into.
Yeah, so it allows us to touch on some of the other stuff.
Because y'all will be hearing about most of the things we talk about here. There's probably going to be whole episodes about a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, so I figured we just introduce some of the interests that will probably continuously come up over and over again and just get that out on the table. So that's why I kind of started with what was the first movie, because that's obviously a lot of books and everything, so... Let's get into the books real quick. What is the first book you ever checked out at the library?
I don't remember.
I'm just saying that the one that you can remember that was your decision. You're like, I want to read this book. It's a tough question, I know, but...
The Hobbit. I watched The Lord of the Rings, and my cousin and uncle, they were fans of Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, so I went and checked that out, and my uncle saw me reading it, and next thing I know, he gave me the set. So, yeah.
That's interesting, because I remember my librarian from my elementary school, because by the time I left my elementary school in the 5th grade, or at the end of the 5th grade, she already knew who I was, because I was quite the reader by then already. And she, like, gifted me a copy of The Hobbit as I was, like, leaving. It was, like, our last little class visit to the library for the year. And she saying goodbye to all these students that had been with her since fucking kindergarten. And I guess I was one of the ones she remembered the most, because she gifted me that book. And it was also my 5th grade teacher gifted me a book for Christmas that same year, and it was Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, which will probably come up in a couple of weeks when we were discussing Christmas and shit.
Yeah, most likely.
But
So I had a couple teachers give me books because I wasn't much of a reader in school. I was when I really got into it, but there was a lot of reading certain books for certain classes, and I just wasn't about reading what I was told to read. I want to read what I want. So I just didn't read much. So when I did take an interest in a book and a teacher noticed it, like if I borrowed one, I had a couple different times there where a teacher would give me a book. But other than that, like my librarian in excuse me, my librarian in elementary school, Mr. Maxwell at Boone Park, he was really dope. He knew I wasn't much of a reader, so he sat down and talked to me and got to know what I was into, and got me turned on to certain books and recommended me and got me into reading. He's the one that got me into the Bailey School Kids. Loved them. I was already reading Goosebumps, but he got me into more R.L. Stein.
I figured Goosebumps gonna come up again, probably.
Several random fantasy books and whatnot, just really helped me get into it.
Well, so I figured we'd bring up since we're talking about reading in school and elementary school and everything, you remember the Scholastic Book Fair? Like, did they still do that?
Was dope. Yeah. Yeah, my nephews talk about it a lot.
Oh, that's dope.
Once a year.
I mean, that's pretty cool. But, like, that's one of those things that should come up, because I did make some notes, and one of the things I figured would come up is this kind of thing. So I'm going to just name off a couple of books that I read in elementary school and see if, like, you ever found interest in them. So obviously there's Holes.
Oh yeah, everyone read Holes. It was great.
And then I think it's by the same guy as Maniac McGee.
Maniac McGee, dude. No shit. At Thanksgiving, I looked at my brother's bookshelf and I even pointed out he still has Maniac McGee, and not just that he has the book. He has the book that he got when he was in 3rd grade.
And then of course there's Tales of a 4th Grade Nothing.
I don't remember that one.
It was a Super Fudge. Was like the sequel.
Okay, yes. Okay, I know what those are. I didn't read them, but I know what they are. Hatchet.
Yeah, I got Hatchet written down too. Then I because I read it several times through elementary school, and it's one of the books that kicked off my reading frenzy that took off in middle school. It was Wind in the Willows.
Oh my god, one of my childhood favorites.
And then like The Adventures of Mr. Toad and all those books. I wanted to mention some of those because, I mean, that's also the period that I got into, like, comic books and stuff, and so that's a whole other, conversation.
Yeah.
But those are really the books that they gave us during that period that I was like, all right, like, reading can be interesting. Like, these are some...
They give us fun books.
Yeah, and I'm just... It's one of those trends that we kind of discussed would definitely come up again, is how, like, our generation kind of did hit a gold mine in that kind of media for kids.
Oh, yeah, we did.
A lot of the books that were written specifically for our generation coming up in that age range are some of the like, I've read some of the ones for this day and age, and yeah, there's some decent ones here and there, but, like, I don't know, like, we hit a gold mine in a lot of ways in that sense. Like you mentioned Goosebumps, like, come on.
Gold.
We also got the TV show Goosebumps.
Oh, that was so good.
Which is basically like, what would you call it? Like Twilight Zone, but for kids that like gross shit, like... That's...
I guess.
Because, I mean, a lot of the horror tropes that R.L. Stein used were kind of... there's a lot of body horror, like the whole mask thing, like
gross out
just
horror. Yeah.
If you think about what's going on with the mask thing, that's kind of icky.
Well, I mean, that's what scares kids.
Yeah, and there was like, what is it, ghost blood or monster blood?
I don't know, man. Slappy wasn't gross. He was just terrifying.
Yeah.
But the gnomes.
Yeah, the gnomes weren't gross really either, but
the gnomes in the TV show was
the gnomes had
nightmares.
Yeah, the gnomes had the gnomes had like a Doctor Who, like weeping angel like vibe where the shit, like, they didn't really move if an adult or whatever was looking.
Yeah, but if it was a kid, they didn't give a fuck.
Yeah. And that's why, like, that was another thing is we also were coming up in the age where, like, CGI wasn't so prevalent to where people were just willy-nilly using it, so most of the effects for stuff like that were still practical effects.
Yeah.
And it was just touched up with CGI. And that to me always worked better. That's basically how Lord of the Rings was done. Like, there was some CGI in that, but it was mostly just touching up certain fucking
that
things.
That was pretty good to me.
Yeah, that's still like
Lord of the Rings. That got us into fantasy hardcore, and
I mean, yeah, like her giving me that book, The Hobbit, like that definitely put me on a specific trajectory in my reading. To where, yeah, like obviously I read Lord of the Rings shortly thereafter and got into that, and you know,
I've probably read Lord of the Rings more than anything else. I've probably read the entire series a good 6 or 7 times.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, I don't even know how many times at this point that I've read it, but it's just this pretty much like The Dark Tower and even like Harry Potter, where I've just read them so many times growing up that going back to read them now, I don't even know what number I'm on at this point.
I know from 8th through 12th grade, I read them once a year to do a book report on them because it was an easy book report to do, and I enjoyed reading them.
I mean, yeah, I did a book report on, it wasn't just on Lord of the Rings, it was on Tolkien, so it was a lot more about his academic work and his, language. Like, that dude could speak, by the time he died, like 65, 66 different languages. And the fucked up thing is like 40 of them were ones that he created and invented. Obviously I'm exaggerating slightly on that, but it's
still ridiculous.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I found interesting is people like Tolkien because of his, it's not necessarily because he was an academic and could speak all these languages and was an expert on like the publication history of Beowulf and so on and so forth. Did his own personal translation of Beowulf from the original manuscript, and just like that's not why people like Tolkien. Those are just kind of like interesting facts that you find out afterwards.
No, they're like, oh, that's cool, but Lord of the Rings.
But the once you do dig into that history and learn about Tolkien and everything, the interesting fact is that his story, the epic story that you fell in love with and that I fell in love with, and that we watch in film version at least once a year and so on and so forth,
at least, was created
as a history and backstory for the languages that he was creating, and that was really his interest. That's why it took like 30 fucking years for him to actually write the novels,
because he cared more about the language than the books.
Yeah, and so that kind of you don't really get that kind of epic story and with all of this backstory anymore. But obviously we're reading in On the People's History of Horror, one of the few modern era stories that kind of does have that kind of backstory and history in the Dark Tower series, because there's so many novels and little little side trails that you could go down. And so I bring that up because in that period, getting deep into the Tolkien stuff, I was also getting deep into the Stephen King stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So I was kind of sent on that journey because of The Hobbit, but it was really Stephen King's the one that really got me interested in the epicness of Lord of the Rings. And so I kind of was reading Tolkien different once I started reading King, and maybe that, overly informs my vision of both of those epic texts, because, I don't know, it's like with Tolkien, there's like a different kind of obviously a different kind of life story
Yeah.
that informs his writing versus King. And so obviously that's a whole conversation we can have. But with someone like Tolkien, like you said, once you get into him, you're like, man, I want some more fantasy.
Yeah.
I want some more and obviously I was into King, and so I was hitting other novelists like Dean Koontz. We mentioned him before. He'll probably come up again.
Crichton.
Michael Crichton. He's one that really, once you get into Crichton, you kind of like just, man, I want to read all of his shit, because he doesn't really have that many books compared to, especially back then.
And they're bangers.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
Jurassic Park,
and they're
come on.
they're relatively short and quick, and fast paced, and so yeah, like I read like 4 or 5 of them in the same amount of time it took me to read something like The Shining, or especially something like It. And so yeah, and also noticed that, we'll do another shout out for Mike's book reviews. Like he has a very similar taste that I did growing up. So like
Yeah,
he
same.
touched on King and Tolkien and Michael Crichton. Like those are a lot of his favorite stuff. And
That's why we could talk books, because we like the same shit.
Yeah, and so that's why I was drawn to his channels, because it's like, like he likes the same kind of books. And so I found that interesting, that a lot of times King and Crichton do tend to go together, like
Yeah.
even though they don't really write similar kinds of stories.
No.
So that's just an interesting fact that I've noticed. Obviously, a lot of people compare Kuntz with King. That comes up a lot. And I can see why, especially with his early stuff, like we mentioned before. A lot of his best work is done in the earlier years of his career. But a lot of people say the same thing about King, so we'll just not go down that route right now. But obviously with Tolkien, he kind of sends you more towards the fantasy stuff. For me, I found Terry Brooks, read, all the Shannara books and Landover novels. Pretty much followed him all the way through the Shannara book. It was like 30-something different novels. Those ones are pretty good. The first one, everyone always mentions, it's basically just a beat-for-beat ripoff of the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Yeah.
With kind of a more European adventure novelist flavor. But I liked it, and I liked it enough to... Obviously, he made it completely original by the second one and did his own thing with elves and the, forbidding and everything. So obviously, I could do a whole episode on Terry Brooks. We probably will. Like I said, a lot of the stuff we're bringing up is just going to have... Tolkien probably could get like a whole trilogy of episodes, But what about, and I've mentioned this kind of before, we did mention it a couple different times on the other, but with The Exorcist.
Ooh, one of my favorites.
That's, yeah. With The Exorcist, that, that's a whole era we'll get into on the horror podcast.
I'm actually in the middle of reading it right now.
Yeah. Because obviously it's a similar era where horror was kind of taken off. Really at the beginning of King's career, you had things like Rosemary's Baby. Ira Levin was publishing his stuff like that, and The Stepford Wives. Then you had, other books like there's Thomas Tryon had The Other, and he's the one that did the where you get the whole Wicker Man story.
Yeah.
It's from one of his novels.
Okay. The Bees.
Yeah, it's like a folk horror type of thing. But once again, though, that's all stuff we'll get into on the other ones, but obviously we need to touch on it because we were inspired by that. Things like Tales from the Crypt and X-Files were, booming when we were growing up, and so
those were great.
horror was, and that's another thing, horror was popular in the 90s in a different kind of way than it was before, and a different kind of way than has been since.
There was more of a focus, I guess there was more of I don't know how to word this, like a focus on horror for children.
Yeah, the Goosebumps.
Yeah,
and
Goosebumps was huge.
Scary stories to tell in the dark.
Nickelodeon had Are You Afraid of the Dark? That was dope.
We mentioned we wanted to probably do an episode on things like Courage the Cowardly Dog, or Ren and Stimpy, like the weird fucking just. It was horror, but there was a lot of weird horror style, like
it was trippy.
Which I mean, kids can look at some of that and laugh. You know, I was reading or heard someone somewhere mention that it's strange that there really wasn't a clown episode of Courage the Cowardly Dog because.
Oh, it's so fitting.
Yeah, well, it's just when a series for kids that aims in a horror direction, especially for kids, but also, you know, even for adults, like there's always a
clown.
Yeah, just like there's always probably a scarecrow, which that brings us to things like Batman. He has a lot of those same tropes.
So speaking of Batman, I guess let's talk superheroes. I know you're a comic book guy, you know, to the core, and you know me. I read them. I loved reading them from time to time, but I never really got them much. So wasn't that big in the comics. That wasn't what got me into superheroes. Batman animated series was definitely one of them. Batman and X-Men. Those animated
Spider-Man
series,
was a good.
Those were great too. Those are the two that really got me into it.
No one ever includes the Spider-Man animated episode or like that series in the great. Same.
And it crossed over.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like it was obviously it didn't cross over with Batman, but that would have been cool.
Oh, that would have been awesome.
I mean, you hardly ever really get a Marvel DC crossover. Sometimes you do.
And it's amazing when it happens.
Yeah. But I know those are really just other examples of how like 90s cartoons were just superior because we also had things like Thundercats and Gargoyles and
all right, the cartoons we grew up on were like through all stages were great. Like when we were younger and it was just Rugrats. Amazing. I still watch that. I don't care. We get older, we started watching Courage and other things like that. Always Scooby-Doo through our whole life. Who doesn't watch that? But when we got to like Gargoyles, X-Men, you know, rewatching old Thundercats, just cool shit like that.
And Darkwing Duck.
Darkwing Duck was amazing, dude.
We'll have to talk more about like Disney stuff because that's a whole Disney Channel versus Nickelodeon versus Cartoon Network.
I'm sorry, but Nick, give it to Nickelodeon. I love all three, but it's Nickelodeon, bro. But
I mean, it's hard for me.
I say that, but I'm about to name drop one of the top of all time, and it's a Cartoon Network show. You can argue Cartoon Network. But,
I already said Courage.
But Ed, and Eddie.
Yeah, Ed, and Eddie. Cow and Chicken. What were your feelings about Cow and Chicken?
Cow and Chicken was cool. I liked that they had the devil in like 3 different shows. I Am Weasel, Cow and Chicken, and he was in Johnny Bravo.
Yep. And like he was, and that's the thing is like I don't want to get too political, but like if that kind of character was in our show today,
he'd be canceled.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be the left that wanted to cancel him. So we'll just leave that there. But my thing with, you know, mentioning like our shows were better and everything, or they were at least really good. You mentioned Johnny Bravo. There's also Dexter's Laboratory.
Oh, Dexter's Lab was a banger.
Notice that you supported Nick, but pretty much all the cartoons we've named so far has either been Cartoon Network or Disney Channel.
That's true. And
so, to give some ups to Nickelodeon, obviously there's Rugrats. That one was always playing.
Rocket Power.
Rocket Power.
All Real Monsters.
Hey Arnold.
Hey Arnold was amazing, dude. I love Hey Arnold.
Then of course there's the Wild Thornberrys.
Wild Thornberrys. Oh my God, Tim Curry was Nigel. That's my dude.
Yeah, Tim Curry is a 90s hero, I guess you could say. Obviously, he pretty much kind of got started in the 80s, but he really kind of took off in the 90s. He was also the evil dude in Fern Gully, you know, and Fern Gully is one that just that was one we could watch in school because it was like an Earth Day classic. You remember Earth Day? They always
Earth Day was awesome in school. We went outside and planted a tree and like
had all sorts of
watched a
games and
dope ass
stuff.
movie like such as
Fern
Fern
Gully.
Gully.
Speaking of Fern Gully, and obviously Tim Curry is the reason I mentioned that, but really the champion of Fern Gully,
My favorite, Robin Williams.
Robin Williams,
My hero.
another hero of the '90s. We could name off Robin Williams roles. Obviously, he did Aladdin. Going back to Disney once again, it'll keep coming up. Disney movies are awesome.
I could probably quote for you the entire script for Mrs. Doubtfire.
Mrs. Doubtfire. You remember what was the one where he was a boy?
Jack.
Jack.
Jack was amazing.
And of course, there's Patch Adams.
Fran Drescher's sexy ass was his teacher in Jack. Patch Adams was great. That was fun. He had the War with the Squirrels.
Mm-hmm. That guy was also in a lot of things. You remember Air Bud?
Yeah, he was the bad guy.
And he was the clown.
He was
dude.
the one that had Mr. Jingles.
He was like the mean
Green
clown
Mile.
guy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Had
that
the
dude, was
Green
in,
Mile.
that dude was in all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. I was Jurassic Park 3. We mentioned Jurassic Park and Michael Crichton earlier. Jurassic Park 3, he was the mercenary that they hired.
All right, I'm going to point something out, and this is for everybody. This is for the world. How crazy is it, the ending of Jurassic Park 3, when he like is having that dream of the raptor, and they're just like,
Oh, that was the
Alan.
beginning.
That was the beginning?
Yeah, that's when he's on the way
Oh,
there.
yeah. Oh, whatever. How crazy is that?
It's so
Just-
surreal. Just
we have a dude at work named Alan, and like all the time I'm like, Alan, and like he doesn't get it. I'm like, I wish Aaron worked here.
Yeah. So we kind of mentioned what our favorites were growing up, we were mentioning that that's kind of the direction we were going here, at least here at the beginning.
Yeah.
And one I always want to mention, like one of those animated cartoons, it's not Disney. I'm pretty sure it's not DreamWorks, and it's some other company.
Yeah.
But it's very anime-esque. But I don't want to say it's an anime because I don't know if it's actually. But
Quit teasing us, man. What is it?
Little Nemo.
Oh, Little Nemo was amazing. All right, we talk about this all the time. Little Nemo and Bedknobs and Broomsticks were like on repeat at my house.
Oh, Bedknobs and Broomsticks, man, that's another Disney classic right there.
But yeah, Little Nemo. It was on one of the streaming services. I don't remember which one, but it was on one the other day, or a couple months ago, I guess. And I had the boys watch it, and they loved it.
Fucking Slumberland, man.
It's
That's
great.
so dope. And that's just one that it's kind of like The Land Before Time, where it's just
Tree star.
it's so different than the other kind of animated movies we got, because it was clearly not a Disney movie. So I remember this as a kid, and I think I've mentioned it to you before, but most people that I've asked don't remember it, and it's fair to ask you because I feel like it's a poor person's movie. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it was like the cheesy rip-off version of Aladdin. It
Yes.
wasn't the Disney one.
Yes,
but it was,
he wore like the colors were slightly different.
I mean, it was more loyal to the actual story.
Didn't he wear like a red vest instead of a purple one?
something like that?
Yes,
Or
I
like he wore
remember
like a
that.
full shirt.
Yeah, but he kind of looked like Prince Eric.
So I mean, like, yeah, we could discuss like Nickelodeon, obviously Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, that whole feud with Disney Channel thrown in.
Yeah.
To me, Disney Channel could never really quite compete.
No, Disney Channel was great for what we got, but it wasn't as good as those two. It was all about their movies.
Yeah. But obviously we were talking about like weird shit for kids.
Yeah.
And it really wasn't like a horror thing for kids, which is where we were kind of focused there for a while. But speaking of weird shit for kids, Big Comfy Couch.
Oh my god. Yeah, it was entertaining. Bananas in pajamas.
But no, man. Bananas and that was some. I mean, obviously we grew up with Barney and
That
like
was my
the
dude,
Muppets
bro.
and shit.
I loved Barney when I was a child.
And so, like, with that, like, we got plenty of surreal Like, have you seen like old clips of like Sesame Street? It's so disturbing, bro. Like,
Yeah.
it's so fucking weird. But speaking of that, you remember like some of the early Disney cartoons are some of the most disturbing animation that you'll like ever
Yeah.
fucking see. And so, speaking of Disney, like that once again, that's obvious. That could probably get multiple episodes, just
Oh,
like
man.
some
Yeah,
of these
the-
other topics. But
Like, shitty person, but man,
yeah, he's a piece of shit. But
quality product.
yeah,
So yeah, I mean, obviously, 90s kid, in my opinion, Aladdin, that's number one, bro.
everyone mentions The Lion King, but
It's great, but there's
I'm not.
better.
I'm not sure either one of those would be on my list. They're like I said, we're gonna probably do a whole thing with Disney, but there is like the history of like when they lost some funding and they were trying to cut back on everything, and so you could see the transition from the early Disney with
Yeah.
like Snow White and Peter Pan and some of those early
You can
ones.
see the budget difference.
But you can see the budget difference and the coloration between something like Snow White, Peter Pan, those early years versus something like Aristocats and Robin Hood.
Yeah.
And it's because that's during the age. Like you always see the idea of they reused some of the clips. And so like the dancing cat in Aristocats
Oh, yeah,
dances
dude.
just like the foxes dance in Robin Hood.
Mowgli and Baloo dancing, that is used in so many
Yeah, that's
frames.
that same era. So, and you can see the difference in just the tone of the movie is like they didn't put quite so much budget into the inking of
Yeah.
like the Fox and the Hound is another one in that era. That's like towards the end of the era where things started to build up. But I just named several of my personal favorite Disney because I guess that era
So-
is my personal favorite. I guess because 101
Yeah.
Dalmatians.
Those are all great. I loved all of them. We watched, I'm a movie guy, you know this, so we watched a lot of Disney. We watched a lot of kid shit, but we watched a lot of Disney. But Aladdin, that was my number one. I already said that, but honestly, man, I like the ones that nobody, the hidden gems that nobody ever wanted to talk about.
Great Mouse Detective.
Like Great Mouse Detective was yes,
It's also in that same era.
that was on repeat when I was a kid.
Here.
But Black Cauldron,
Oh, yeah.
Oliver and Company, loved Oliver and Company.
Hell yeah.
Sword in the Stone.
Oh, yeah.
like,
Sword in the Stone
those-
is
those were
definitely
some of my
like
favorites.
top 3 for me. One interesting thing is, speaking of that transition between the, bright color, the more darker, muted ink tones, and then back into what they call like the Revolution era, which is like our era 90s stuff. So that'd be like Aladdin, But it started with The Rescuers. So The Rescuers is one of those toned down. The first one is in that toned down, muted colored era.
Yeah.
And then the second one is in that like Revolution era
Rescuers Down Under.
yeah, everything
That
got
was good,
super
too.
bright, and so that's just an interesting. If you wanted to look at the timeline of Disney, those two movies is a good way to just watch that transition. But one movie, like you said, you like the hidden gems and everything. One movie that I always like to mention because it did kind of get overlooked in a lot of ways. You mentioned the Black Cauldron and the Sword and the Stone. I don't even think it is a Disney movie, but what is the Quest for Camelot?
Oh, I don't think it is Disney. Was it one of no?
Was
Was
it one
it
of those?
DreamWorks?
I was gonna say, was it one of those early DreamWorks like
I
Sinbad?
think so.
And,
I think so.
okay.
That was great. Okay, what was Secret for Nim? Or
Yeah,
Secret
that-
of the Nim? What?
You see, is the Secrets of Nim?
Yeah, Secret. Yeah,
Uh,
great. Great
Yeah, I don't
movie.
think it was just like what is it? Once Upon a Forest. Once Upon a Forest. I don't like. We'll put that on the screen too. But that's I'll let you borrow it. It's great. It's a great
Is
movie.
that the one with the hedgehog or whatever?
Yeah, it's like the hedgehog and
yes.
the rat and
yes.
the
Okay. Yes.
yeah.
We've discussed this. I just can't ever remember the name.
Yeah, it's Once Upon a Forest.
Well, all right. Since we're talking about, while we're still talking about like childhood shows that like really shaped our becoming nerds, it kind of started with Power Rangers, man. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. They were kings in the 90s.
Oh yeah, we gotta we should also, we'll get into like manga and anime and all that with like Pokemon, Dragon Ball Z.
Oh, yes. Dragon Ball Z, Bebop, Naruto, they got me in deep. I'm
You got a
super
Bleach
weak.
shirt on right
I'm
now.
literally wearing an Ichigo shirt, yes.
And so, well, we'll get into that here in a minute. But just mentioning, those kinds of shows like Power Rangers. I always just want to bring up Digimon because it gets overlooked
Because
and
Pokemon overshadowed it, and Digimon was great. Now, it kind of went off the rails to me. I feel like OG
but so did
Digimon.
Pokemon.
Oh, Pokemon's stupid after the first generation, in my opinion. Hate me. I don't care. But, yeah, no, Digimon, like, the original one was dope. After that, when it, like, the kids started transforming instead of just their,
yeah.
I wasn't about it.
Well,
it was neat. Not about it, though.
I feel like it wasn't so much Pokemon that overshadowed it as like Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yeah.
Because they were both kind of like picking up on the trail of Pokemon anyways.
That's true. It was to sell trading cards.
Yeah, and Digimon didn't really do that as much as
No,
the other
because it
ones.
pushed it for the show, whereas the other two, like,
Were more about the
Pokemon
game.
was pushing a game, and Yu-Gi-Oh was pushing a card game.
Well, just bringing that up, that was also in the era of we mentioned like Thundercats and stuff, but then we didn't mention Transformers. But my personal favorite Transformers was Beast Wars.
Oh, Beast Wars was amazing, man. Optimus Primal.
Yeah, and so aren't they doing that movie or
They did, and I'm gonna be honest, like, I watched it and I enjoyed myself.
I kind of that's pretty much how I feel about all the Transformers. It's like it's not.
Oh, not all of them.
It's
I
not
stopped
what I
watching
was-
for a reason.
I'm just saying that they're not. None of them are what I wanted in a Transformers movie or what I would have envisioned.
No, you just go get high as fuck and just watch cool shit for 2
Yeah.
hours. That's all you need to expect.
Yeah, it's just cool robot sounds and explosions and stuff. Which, that's just one of those movies. To me, a lot of them are like, and this is one thing we'll bring up because I did grow up on these kinds of movies, like the kaiju. We mentioned, like
yes.
Pokemon. Like each episode basically ended
Yes.
with like a kaiju fight.
Godzilla, Kong, all that. Like,
And I know my friend on Facebook made a post today, and it was like the whole Paul Bunyan being a kaiju, which is the first American kaiju.
I've seen that he's a mutant, but I haven't seen that he's a kaiju.
Well, yeah, I could see that he's clearly something, some of a mutant, but the whole idea was like kaiju versus Godzilla, or not kaiju versus Godzilla, but Paul Bunyan versus Godzilla as a movie idea.
I mean, he's got an ox and an axe, bro. Like, he's got a shot.
Well, my idea was more like Godzilla and King Kong team up against Paul Bunyan and his pet dog Clifford. Because
Or-
Clifford is another kaiju that people
or-
forget about.
I got a better one. Well, he's already got a pet ox. All right, he adopts Clifford, and it's a series where he just hunts kaiju.
There you go.
He's a kaiju trophy hunter.
Yeah. So he's got a steed and his bull, his blue bull. What's the bull's name? I always forget.
And it's just blue
Maybe.
because it's a blue bull.
Possibly. But anyways,
Isn't it a female, but it's an ox? Like,
I
per the story, I don't remember.
think it is an ox, not a bull. Anyways, we'll
I don't
have
know.
to do our research and look
I
into
don't
that.
remember.
It is now officially horror history because we're now calling it a kaiju, and that's a whole.
Yeah, Paul Bunyan. I mean, Stephen King tried to he tried to warn us. It's a horror.
Yeah, we'll get to that in the it episode, but so that does kind of transition us into more middle school adulthood and away from some of the kid stuff because we could talk Disney all day, anyways.
All right, so we got the most random shows, and they were gold. Through childhood and middle school, we were both big fans of Whose Line.
Oh yeah, Whose Line Is It Anyway?
And that definitely shaped like our sense of humor in multiple ways.
I've seen Colin Mockery and Brad Sherwood in. Is it called a concert when it's a comedian, or is it just?
I think everything's called a concert now, so
okay,
probably
sure. Why not? Anyway, it was an event. It was quite enjoyable. That is definitely a type of humor that formed around that show. I mean, there's always been improv, but they had a certain style of improv where they would like play games with it instead of just doing a scene.
That's where that picked up from them.
Yeah. And so, like, I definitely appreciate that. But, I mean, yeah, we got a fucking American Gladiators.
Oh, American Gladiators was gold, but we Jackass?
I mean, Jackass, yeah. Definitely, we got various, you know.
The Crocodile Hunter.
Oh, yeah, Steve Irwin.
Man.
And, I mean, he was one of those celebrities that, like, he didn't really have to do anything to be famous. I mean, obviously he had his show, and so, but I feel like he would have eventually, especially in today's age, he would have
found him.
Yeah, he would have caught online, like went viral, and eventually had a show anyways.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad we got something like that growing up that was separate from that. Like he wasn't trying to be a celebrity. It was trying to like be educational.
I feel like someone that was a fan of like Jeff Corwin's show went to Australia, met Steve Irwin, and was like, this guy would be so much better, and just made a call, made that happen.
I mean, we got like the height of Animal Planet and Discovery Channel. I feel like because I mean, also growing up, like before we kind of move into more high school era, teenage years, we got things like Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Oh yeah. Oh.
And obviously Mr. Rogers. He's been around for forever, but we still got him.
Bob Ross.
Bob
Ross was my dude. Like I loved watching him from the time I was a child. I still love that today, man. Nothing like a good acid trip in Bob Ross, man.
Where those bushes come from?
Oh my God! You turn around and like for 3 seconds, and there's like 80 more bushes.
So yeah, that kind of brings us into like I did want to discuss some of our old tales. The episode kind of involves our inside jokes and our old tales and stories that we have. And speaking of, we just kind of referenced the fact that we have, in fact, tripped acid and watched some Bob Ross. We can get into more stories of our various adventures, and we like that spirit we call, going to Taco Bell at 2 a.m. an adventure, because in our case,
everything's an adventure.
Yeah, and we've had some wild adventures in that sense, and so I figured we'd bring some of those up. And so let me ask you this: we mentioned our first time smoking and everything. How about let me hear your story. The first time you tripped.
First time I tripped?
Yeah. I mean, the first time you actually went somewhere when you fucking did trip. Is that a hard question?
It is, dude. I don't remember at this point.
All right, well, I mean, what is
because there were so many duds for so long.
Yeah, so what is your first good story that you remember and, like, would tell someone if...
All my memorable ones were with you.
It's
the grill.
The grill.
The grill kept sneaking up on me.
It's the same Bob Ross night with
the same. That night was probably the best. That was not the best trip I've ever had. But that was just because of pure amount.
Yeah, we did quite a bit. Anyway, my thing with tripping is like there is a difference in experience of tripping by yourself, kind of like watching movies by yourself or, alone. Because that's a question that's a whole other
If you're
debate.
tripping by yourself, like, just find something to do to keep you kind of occupied to, like, get it going. And then once it gets going good, have Alice in Wonderland, like the cartoon, like, ready to go to just
Once
pop
again-
it in and start it. And you're welcome.
Once again, Disney comes to the rescue. And to me, that's not even, like, really the only... Everyone mentions Alice in Wonderland because obviously it's got the historical vibe with Jefferson Airplane incorporating, White Rabbit into the whole acid trip thing. And it kind of got, picked up in the hippie culture. You see a lot of Alice in Wonderland posters on the hippies wall.
It's
I
the
got 2 of
animation
them.
from the show.
Yeah, but a lot of those shows are just as trippy as Alice in Wonderland. It's more
Dumbo.
Exactly. I mean, there's Dumbo. There's some quite crazy scenes from ones like you mentioned the Sword in the Stone,
The squirrel scene.
the Black Cauldron. Well, I mean, what about the hell scene in All Dogs Go to Heaven?
Oh, that would be terrifying. I'm trying to have a good trip.
I'm just saying, like, but it is at least a hallucinatory scene.
Yeah, I have to do that sometime.
Yeah, well, we'll see. So, you mentioned all the crazy kinds of shows we had growing up, like Jackass and everything. We did also grow up in the best era of wrestling, and we both grew up on that.
Before we get into that, you made me think of something I did not bring up. Ilmex C. You remember that?
What, no,
Most
what-
Extreme Challenge? It
Oh,
was-
yeah,
dude.
Yeah, like that. It's kind of like one of those. You remember, like what's the one with like the craziest cop car chases and shit? Like those-
Cops.
I mean, yeah, you got cops, but no, there was one that was like it's a clip show similar to.
Oh, World's Dumbest.
Yeah, those ones are fun too.
Yeah, with all the like the D-list celebrities on there commentating. Yeah,
I
like
mean,
Danny
we-
Bonaducci and shit.
I mean, we also grew up in like the era where there was a lot more backyard wrestling things. And I mean, what was?
There was.
You remember bum fights?
Oh, bum fights for real. Yeah, I remember
And
that.
this shit was terrible, bro.
It was terrible,
awful.
man. But
But yeah, like it all does kind of come from the heyday of the WWF, not the WWE, but the
Yeah.
WWF back in Monday Night Wars era.
Raw era.
Yeah, and so, I mean, we could talk all day about that. Like, we got that's the era of The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin. Like, still relevant.
Being a wrestling fan as a child is why I'm good at talking shit today.
I mean, yeah, like, but I mean, like, there's also one, we could probably do a horror episode about wrestling.
They had Chucky on there. Big Show had him. I remember that.
I remember that. Oh man, speaking of Big Show and fucked up things that were on TV when we were kids, you remember the whole scene with his dad's funeral? It was like the Big
Yeah.
Boss Man stole the
Yeah.
casket,
Yeah.
and he's like riding along. And the Big Boss Man is an underrated wrestler, not in the sense that he was good at wrestling, because he wasn't, but the storylines that he accepted and where it was involved in.
We're so ridiculous.
Because he like fed Al Snow his own dog.
He was a savage.
He did that thing with Big Show, but so if like just to highlight our childhood, bringing up wrestling and everything, what would be the craziest shit that you remember from the Attitude Era? The whole Monday Night Wars era.
Okay. There was I believe it was a SummerSlam one year that they had. You're smiling and you immediately know what year I'm talking about. They had. That was when Lita had cheated like on Matt Hardy with Edge, like for real, and they kept bringing it up on show, like getting into it. And Vince had pulled him aside and was like, "Look, guys, leave it separate. If you keep doing this, we're gonna fucking write it into the story, and we're gonna do what we want with it. And they couldn't leave it separate, so it got wrote into becoming the main event. And yeah, like
That's how Edge ended up with the fucking briefcase,
Yeah.
and where he ended up,
But
like...
not just that. They also had Rey Mysterio versus Eddie Guerrero in a custody battle for Rey Mysterio's son.
Who's a main event wrestler, like one of their like North American champions nowadays, Dominic Mysterio.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
dude with like
The
what,
mullet,
Rhea Ripley.
yeah, with the mullet. But yeah, that's Rey Mysterio's kid from that same
Yep.
storyline. Which, I mean, yeah, that's inevitable. You're gonna end up it being a part of the show. I mean, I would also bring up things like, obviously, it was not necessarily the best era for women because they had like the bra and panties matches and everything.
The puppies.
Yeah, like Jerry King Lawler with the whole puppies thing. Which, I mean, when we was a kid, that was fun and entertaining and everything because we didn't know any better.
I was an adolescent boy. I fucking loved it. But I mean,
Yeah.
now I'm like, hey man, that's not cool.
Yeah, like, that's a bit much. But no, the thing I was gonna like a lot of people are like celebrating the fact that like they're letting someone like Rhea Ripley wrestle a man in
Yeah.
like a legitimate match and everything. But
Yeah, because she
back
could
then
actually
it
move
was
his
like a
ass.
crazy. It was
Yeah.
a crazy concept that someone like Trish Stratus would get put through a table. Or like Mae Young got put through a table at the age of like 70 years
All right,
old.
just don't let the divas near the Dudleys.
I mean, yeah. But, like, to me, I just mention all that to highlight, like, the craziness of that era. But storyline-wise, they were a lot, braver in their stories. And nowadays, they are getting better than they were. There were a few years where it was really dry and repetitive. But to me, that's just another thing where, like, our era growing up, like, our media was better. And so that kind of takes me to a little sub-conversation I wanted to have here with you about how, like, what is your opinions on older movies versus newer movies? Like, do you think that there is a difference?
So I'm gonna say older movies are better, and with that being said, with new movies, I feel like most of them are just kind of rehashing the same story, retelling something that's already been told, just a sequel that's not really that good of a story, just money grabbing.
It's all remakes and sequels
it's
and
hardly any originals. But with that being said, when there is a good movie that's a new movie, it's a great movie. But no, old movies for sure. I mean, Terminator,
Die Hard.
Rambo.
I mean, fucking Rocky.
Oh, true. All big action classics.
Yeah.
I mean, even childhood ones, like, I know we talked about that a lot, but like Homeward Bound.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we mentioned, Fern Gully, and, I mean, let's not get back into the Disney movies and everything, but the older Disney movies are better than the newer ones, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
The Lion King whoops the
Absolutely.
shit out of Frozen, so... But... nothing against Frozen or anything, but... With that...
All right. Shrek, man. How do we not talk Shrek? I know it's not Disney, so yeah, we'll use that to get back away from all that.
Yeah, it's DreamWorks. I mean, I like DreamWorks movies too. But I mean, you mentioned action flicks. It's not really an action flick, but it has Arnold in it, and it's a great movie from my childhood. But Twins,
Oh, Twins.
Danny DeVito.
Twins, and you know what else was random as fuck with him that I loved? Junior, where he got
Yeah.
pregnant.
Yeah, what the fuck? No, so I mean, we could go all day with. Arnold is one of those like Robin Williams style figures. Like I prefer Robin, and I think you do too.
Oh, yeah.
But he is one of those because I mean,
But I love dude.
like Last Action Hero, where he's basically just pawning himself.
Yeah.
Like, and
This week I watched Jingle All the Way.
oh yeah, I was about to bring that one up, and so yeah, like as an action hero, like he's one of those that does he'll ham it up when he needs to. I mean, people hate on the movie, but I think he did make a good Mr. Freeze.
Oh, it was so great.
It was just, it worked with the campiness of
I
Batman.
used to beat you. Like, it was awesome, bro.
And so people hate on that, but like I personally thought that it's good in its own way. Like those movies are good in their own way. But I mean the newer Batman is an example of a good movie of nowadays. But to me Batman's always good. It just depends on how you play it. Do you want a campy Batman? Because it works.
Yeah, you just gotta.
Because Batman is an absurd concept.
You gotta run with your style. Like, you can't be all over the place back and forth with it. You gotta know which way you're going with it. Like, you wanna go campy, go campy. Tim Burton. It was great.
Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of the thing about nowadays is people take the advice of with something like that is an absurd concept. And a lot of movie concepts that people don't really think about, they are absurd. Even a lot of your slasher flicks that try to take themselves seriously, they take themselves too seriously.
And they become a joke.
And I feel like that's why 90s kind of get a bad rap, is because they were playing with that line of
they didn't take themselves serious.
You have to take yourself serious in the right way. You can't take yourself too seriously, but you also, if you are going to be the campy version, you have to take that seriously. And that's why, for example, Robin Williams was so great, is because he knew exactly who the fuck he was and what he was good at. And he took himself seriously in the sense of he could do a serious role, something like Good Will Hunting, for example. And like he was good at the dramatic roles as well, but he knew when to let loose and tell a joke even in a serious moment, and it would work for him and someone like Jim Carrey, for example, because Jim Carrey has those roles that he can do drama just as well as comedy, but they know how to play it. For example, something like Patch Adams we mentioned earlier.
Yeah, he goes back and forth between being
just a
very
goofy
dramatic and
so, and to me, I feel like that does lend a lot of credence to the 90s, because that was back when they could do sentimental and take themselves seriously and be, almost over dramatic, but because they were taking it seriously, something like the Mighty Ducks, and like a bunch of kids won a hockey game, and it was like the most emotional moment for them. On the surface, if you were in that arena, like for you, it wouldn't seem like why are y'all taking this so fucking seriously? Mm-hmm. It's a kids hockey game. But they played it in a way where like nowadays people would basically make that joke. Like obviously that kind of movie was already being made fun of when we were still like in high school, with something like Dodgeball, or
if you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball.
To me, like that's all I'm saying is like one of the things about the 90s is they took even silly things seriously to the point that they needed to take it to make it work. Because, I mean, Homeward Bound is an absurd concept. Like, yeah, there are those stories where animals find their way home and it's unlikely and everything. But did they defeat a bear and a mountain lion and, escape a pound twice?
Yes, I seen it.
That's fair, but was like, okay, this was more of an 80s example, but something like The Goonies.
Goonies.
Like that movie, it doesn't seem like it's gonna go where the fuck it goes.
No, not at all.
At any point in that movie. And like, that's why it works, because like, everybody in that movie takes it completely seriously. Even though, like, it's kind of hard. Like, Corey Feldman is also obviously really good at that, because in their Stand By Me, we'll probably get to that in the Stephen King read-along thing.
Yeah.
But, these are just examples of great movies growing up. But something like Stand By Me, even though it was before my time, like both the movie being made and put out, and the time that it's in, it's still something that like makes you nostalgic. Like it just has that feel, so it makes you remember your childhood and the friends you had when you were a kid, and obviously your friend growing up is Nick.
Yeah.
And like we all have like those childhood friends that like obviously move along, but you still remember them because you got memories from your childhood and they just happen to be there and be a part of it. So I got several of those, but one thing that I wanted to bring on before we moved too far into the more adult things, because we wanted to talk about some of our acid trips and some of our adventures in our little town. One thing I wanted to bring up is like we mentioned our librarians and our teachers and everything. We mentioned some of our teachers before, but in this sense, in movies that bring nostalgia, what was a movie that was constantly like was overplayed in school for you to the point where it's one of those that like immediately you think of, I saw this in school? Because Shiloh was one of those. I've only ever seen Shiloh at school.
I watched that a lot at the house.
But it had like 3 teachers that were obsessed with that book series and movies, which is why like I was introduced to it. And like
I didn't really get many movies as a kid in school. We got some TV shows quite a bit. It was a lot of Bill Nye and Magic School Bus.
Oh, Magic School Bus. That's how did that one not already come up?
Magic School Bus was great. Mrs. Frizzle was so cool.
Yeah, right. That's one of those like not so nostalgic, but it makes you like regret like not having cooler teachers.
It's another good show to trip on.
Yeah, I haven't tried that. I'm gonna try that.
It's amazing.
So speaking of tripping and watching movies and everything,
because it also gets you thinking.
One of our favorite pastimes, and this is the reason I brought up Nick anyways, is going to the movies after smoking a fat blunt.
After smoking all day, but then smoking one in the parking lot, you mean?
Well, I mean, we always do that, like, where we got to make sure we smoke right before we got to be high when we're in there. And so my question to you is, what is your best experience in that case? This will kind of kick off our adventure tales.
Hands down, went and saw Mad Max Fury Road in 3D.
Oh, nice.
And like I went and saw it in 3D twice and like normal like 4 times probably. It was great. But the scene where the car explodes and there's a steering wheel that comes flying off, and like I have never once jumped in a 3D movie until that moment. But yeah, that was probably my favorite.
Because of my vision issue, it used to be really hard to like get to see 3D movies because they used to do the double lens, and now they just do the And so the first 3D movie that I was actually able to view in any real sense, because I'd seen a couple of 3D movies that were like using the red-blue double lens.
I'd never seen one of those.
And because I'm blind in one eye, like it didn't work.
Yeah.
Like the effect didn't work. And so the first one that I got to see was Shark Boy and Lava Girl.
I was so mad I didn't get to go see that in 3D.
And like, yeah, that was pretty good. So that was my first experience. And I think the next 3D movie that I ever really bothered to watch, because after a while, like I said, like I just didn't fuck with 3D because it didn't really work with my eyes, but was the Hobbit movies. And we had mentioned Lord of the Rings before, but like we watched the movies like how many times like back to back over so many, just smoking
too many times, a couple times a year.
And then there's got to be the extended editions. And like once
if you watch one, you have to watch all 3.
That as well. I mean, that's always been the case. But to me, like, for the longest time, the version of those movies that I watched was the, theatrical version. Saw those in the movie.
Until I bought the extended.
Yeah.
And really until Zach did.
So when we watched the extended editions and then, like, going back and trying to watch the theatrical versions, like, that was really the first time I realized that, like, the theatrical versions don't really work because it references scenes that were in the deleted one. So if you haven't seen that, like, there's certain things that don't quite make sense.
It's just such a good story that people don't give a shit. They overlook it and don't remember.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, like, obviously I understand it's really hard. Nowadays it would work. Nowadays they wouldn't. It'd probably be longer than even the extended edition, just because they don't give a fuck how long a movie is anymore.
Yeah.
But back in 2001 and 2 and 3 and shit, like, they were more concerned about that, and so
I'm saying today we would have got the battle of the Shire.
that as well. We probably would have got Bombadil.
Oh, my boy.
And so basically that's kind of what I wanted to get into, is like, what's the best movies to you, or just the best way to smoke and enjoy yourself? So do you prefer, like, binge watching a series after smoking a fatty, or would you rather go on a walk or whatever?
All right. So, I mean, all of those are great. Going on a walk, not after a blunt, but like smoke a blunt and then, blunt walk with the homies is great. That's, we've spent hours in the park.
Oh yeah, blunt walks are awesome.
But, man, if you're, just at home by yourself all day, just go out, smoke a little bit, or a lot in my case, and then, sit down, find you a good show to sit down and binge watch. Sit down and watch you some Supernatural or some, The Boys, or South Park. Gotta be South Park.
I mean, like, yeah, I mean, there's always the old school, just watch all of Futurama, because there's not that much.
Yeah.
And just...
Yeah, that's an easy one. That's a great one.
But I'm just saying, like, obviously we got numerous stories of watching things. We mentioned before, Big Lebowski, obviously Lord of the Rings. And then there's Step Brothers, is if you just want a good laugh.
Step Brothers, Pineapple Express, This Is the End, anything by those guys, really.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's the classic things like Beavis and Butthead.
Really, if you're going classics, man, you Dazed and Confused.
Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Oh, Fast Times was great. Even American Pie was great, but go to the original one, Corky's.
I prefer, Corky's.
Porky's. Yeah.
But, I mean, there's...
Corky's
I
is
prefer...
a barbecue place. I'm just hungry.
That's fair. As far as American Pie goes, I prefer the little weird... I think it's made by the same people, or at least it's the same style of movie, but Euro Trip.
Oh, Euro Trip was great. Like, Euro Trip, Girl Next Door, and, like, those movies.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's the classic, since we're mentioning classics, but Dude, Where's My Car?
Oh, Dude, Where's My Car is iconic. And Freddy Got Fingered.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Dude, Where's My Car? Like, that's Ashton Kutcher, so I'm surprised that, like, that 70s show hasn't already come up since we mentioned, but that's a...
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess we'll probably talk about that sometime. We should just do a sitcom episode where we just talk about sitcoms, and we can just cover all of our bases in that.
Third of that's going to be us discussing Roseanne.
Okay, yeah, that's probably true. So we mentioned blunt walks. Blunt walks are great. You remember the time we got lost in Burns Park with?
Oh, man.
Was it with Chase?
It was Chase and Nick were with us. We went walking by where the Red Bridge and gazebo and shit is. And, of course, we cut off trail because we always do. And they trust us because everyone did. And, I mean, we spent like 6 hours in the middle of the night walking through this park because we got lost probably an hour in.
Well, I mean, we usually walked during the day, or at least that's where we started to walk, and when it started getting dim, we'd walk by. But with them, we had already kind of had the plan to just like hang out there for a while.
Yeah.
And so, luckily, we did bring some snacks and everything. But it was more of a sense where, like, we knew where we were going at first.
Yeah, and then we got turned around.
By the time it got dark, it's a little different, so we kind of got confused as to where.
The great part, though, was that these two had so much faith in us that we were lost about an hour into the trip, and it was like a 6-hour trip that night. And I'd say for the first half of that trip, at least, they were convinced that we knew exactly where we were.
Wasn't Jesse also with us?
No, Jesse.
He was with us.
Jesse was with us before, and he was all pissy because we went without him, and he didn't want to go. He wanted us to stay and hang out instead.
I think he started walking with us, but once we like started going off further, like
yeah, that's probably what it was. It's like he did that a lot. He'd go down there as soon as we cut off the trail. He was like, "I'm out. I'm going back to my car."
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that was just one of those more interesting adventures in that case. Like me and you've had numerous adventures just walking around the Burns Park, Emerald Park.
Several at night. Like we've done this. That was the night we got lost.
That was the time we went with. This time we did. It was me, you, Jesse, and Katie, and maybe someone else was with us. Nick might have been with us that time. But at that time we saw the deer out there. And, like, Katie didn't want to keep going because there was a deer.
Oh, yeah, she was scared of the deer.
And so, like, to me, though, those are some of the most memorable ones where it's, like, late at night and ain't no one else out there, and we have a friend with us that's scared.
When me, you, and Nick were coming back, and we went to the one park we never go to past the dog park. And, like, we were coming back and stopped because there was a cop just sitting by my truck, like, leaning against it, like they were waiting for me. And we watched them for, like, 45 minutes or so before I was finally like, all right, guys, I got to go talk to them.
And that's ironic because that's the area where Katie likes to go the most.
Exactly. We went to the place Katie wants to go without her. And like,
we got in trouble for
had to deal with it.
And so, yeah, like I said, we got numerous stories of playing catch. Swinging
playing baseball with like a pine cone and a stick.
And I mean, like some of the best ones is just us going out there, like you said, for blunt walks, and then we just get into conversations where, like, you remember the snake that fucking was chasing us right after we were talking about snakes, and there was a fucking snake chasing
it's like
us.
It hurt us. I was like, that's scary.
We hire motherfuckers. Not like the cabin and everything where we thought someone was up in the fucking roof of the cabin while we was in there smoking.
It was probably just like a squirrel.
We was just scared to look up there because, like, in that situation, you know you're going to see a face looking back at you.
It's like 11 o'clock at night. It's dark as fuck. Like,
ain't no one around.
No. I'm not trying to, like, peek up there. That's terrifying. Man, we'd go down by, like, we'd walk the river, like, the park has a trail that leads all the way to the river by my house.
I remember, I don't know if you was with us, but I know like me, Nick, and Zachy would go down there a lot. Me, Jesse, and Zachy would go down there a lot.
Oh, the river trips? Oh, yeah. All the time.
And then there was one day, I guess it was shortly either before or after 4th of July because we had like a bunch of firecrackers and shit. And we were walking down there and... You know, you walk down there, at any point in time, you'll see, like, a dozen rabbits chase you, or, like, the geese will show up, and those motherfuckers will chase you as soon as they see you. When we walked down there was, like, 15 fucking geese, making their way out the water towards more, like, the skate park area. And we had some firecrackers. We thought it was funny. It was, like, one of those string of black cats.
Yeah.
And we lit it, and we thought they would run away. But instead, they attacked us.
Oh, man. That's terrifying.
Like, they immediately knew, like, I don't know what that noise is, but they're here, and that noise wasn't here until they were here, so let's murder them. So we thought we were scaring them away, but really we were just setting them up to scare us away. So we weren't down there for long. But then we went back later, and we were doing the whole, like, throw a bottle rocket in the water and it still explode thing.
Oh, yeah. That's always fun.
all that really did was draw the geese back, and so we got chased away a second time. And so that was a fun adventure from down there.
Man, one of my favorite memories down there, honestly, was so I get to Nick's one day, and like it's him and Zach and you, and like Nick just goes, "Oh, dude, we got to go to the river. We found something." And I was like, "What?" And you were just like, "Oh, we found the chamber," and that's all y'all would tell me. And we start walking down there, and there's this hole in the ground y'all take me to, and we hop down in it, and like walk through, and there's a bunch of chairs and rugs and shit set up, and like all sorts of graffiti on the wall, and it says across the wall in big letters like graffiti Chamber of Secrets, and that became one of the normal smoke sesh hangouts.
Yeah, like we were just out there doing like one of, like we said, one of the regular little
Explore
blunt
the
walks,
area.
and we noticed that there was like this area between two different trails, and then there was like a clearing, but the rest of that little space was just straight trees. But there was like up one side of the trail, there was like this little old bridge area, and we had never like fucked with a little space between.
Yeah.
And so we were wondering if there was like a path that would cut across that instead of having to walk all the way around to
There's
the second.
not, but there's a fucking hole.
Yeah, like we walked through and there's just a hole in the ground, and we're like, oh. But it was the kind of hole where you could see, like, you couldn't necessarily see that what was down there, but you could see like that there was more to it than just this hole. And so our dumb high asses, I'm like, fuck it,
There's enough of us to pull you back up.
Yeah, so like I jumped down there and like I kind of kneeled down and looked, and there's like a little hill of dirt you kind of have to skirt down at an angle. But once you get there, like, yeah, it's just like a hallway. There's a fucking rug laid out.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, there's chairs and candles and shit. Clearly people been doing drugs and fucking and shit down here. Like it's clearly that kind of area. But yeah, like it was just kind of surreal. It was like a whole fucking just...
Yeah.
room.
Can't really go through it anymore now. Like you can, but it's a.
I mean,
pain in the
yeah,
ass to
like
get out.
it's a lot different. There's so much has washed up because the river's flooded up to that point.
It's
So
a big ass jump to get back up.
yeah, and so, I mean, that's just one of those areas. Like we did start calling like that bridge, the bridge to Casa Doom, and like the whole area just kind of got referenced as like Middle Earth. Because there's then what we called Minas Tirith, but it's just like that the little weird concrete, like I guess what once was a piece of a building or something.
I have no idea what
fucking
that
know.
is.
But and it's just this weird little standing chunk of concrete at different levels. Like I don't know what was really going on there, but
It's fun to play on. It's fun to climb on.
yeah. But like. Really, the best part about that is like the walking trail that kind of goes through to Burns Park. Like we've walked that trail numerous times, just smoking a blunt. But we could talk all day about various adventures we had down here. We'll probably dedicate multiple episodes to just those stories. But another place and time that we've had a lot of fun in during that area, speaking of doing drugs and acid and such, is the Trap House. Buttercup.
Oh man, the Trap House. So many great memories and references from the Trap House. Like, yo, you remember the time I was so fucking baked that we were eating popsicles because it was so hot, and like Chase handed me the bong, and I just stared at my popsicle in one hand and the bong in the other, and could not handle like having both. And so I just look at you and completely serious, just say, "Hey, bro. You mind holding my popsicle while I rip this bong? Because I'm an adult."
Yeah, and I mean, there's various bong stories, like when we made a bong.
Oh, the watermelons?
The watermelons. And
we stole a watermelon at least twice a week from KT when we worked there.
Yeah. We didn't never really perfect it, but we made several usable.
It was close. It was close. We were so close to making a perfect one out of the sugar baby.
Mm-hmm. And we got fired and didn't have quite the access to waste so many watermelons. but I mean, you said popsicles. We had like that was a thing that there was just always popsicles.
Popsicles and trap sandwiches.
Yeah. Trap sandwiches. Fucking,
It was-
what do you call them, like sticky something?
I don't remember what he called it after that.
Yeah, but it was just like peanut butter and Nutella grilled cheese style.
Yeah. I told him to add honey to it, and he was just like, after he tried it, he was like, my God. And I was like, yeah, you're
Yeah.
welcome.
It just sets it off. But I mean, like, yeah, that was the same time during the Big Lebowski and Wilfred era, Supernatural era, with
There was a lot of binge watching of those, a lot of that, but more than that, there was a lot of drugs
a lot of drug
and
use.
yes, and the conversations that were had were wild. Immediately, Jesus has dick feet.
Jesus had dick feet. I mean, that was
Shout out to Tara.
that was also the same day that like Bobby found out that I was bisexual, and he lost his mind about it.
That was funny.
But I don't even remember exactly how the story of Jesus came up. But it was the whole idea that Jesus had his feet washed by a prostitute, Mary Magdalene. And it was, like we said, we were discussing something to do with...
Someone was being preachy to Tara and was talking about that. And so we got on the conversation on like, I bet they didn't dump that water. And like, so that was dick water in there. And so she washed his feet with dick water. So he's got dick feet.
Jesus had dick feet. And
so that's our biggest stance on religion. Jesus has dick feet.
yeah. So like, don't get too, high and mighty with your, holier than thou. Cleanliness is next to godliness. So, like, Jesus had dick feet. Like, But
It's next level stank dick.
that was just one of those inside jokes that kind of stuck for obvious reasons. It's a pretty good,
I mean, the joke happened over 10 years ago, and we still talk about it.
yeah. Just because, it's a good punchy line. Jesus had dick feet. Like, it's just a good catchphrase. Like, someone should use that. Pay us,
Yeah.
and we'll let you have it for your business slogan.
You brought up Bobby finding out you were bisexual. It's like, you can't just leave him at that. You gotta tell him about that. That was
Well, it
hilarious.
was just like he didn't live there with us with me, Chase, and Katie.
I never lived there.
You never lived there, but like you
was
stayed,
there.
you slept there multiple times. I mean, so did he, but you were there more often than he was. You were more a part of the shenanigans on a more regular basis. But this time he did happen to be there, and we were discussing something, and I was, whatever reference had made, like, I guess I had a story about it, and the story pertained to me making out with a dude. And so, like, that was, and like, so I'm like, yeah, so I was kissing this dude, and like, he touched me here, and Bobby was just like, whoa, like,
You just kept going into something that was like not pertaining to that at all. Like, it was
Yeah.
nothing. You didn't skip a beat, and like the rest of us knew you and knew, and okay,
yeah, it didn't
You know,
have effect, like,
you're telling a story.
Yeah.
And Bobby, his brain melted for a second, and he was just like, "Stop! You can't keep going. You have to stop there."
so it was just one of those where like I bet it felt more surreal to him. Like, to me it was weird because like I never really had people like stop me on a beat like that just and draw me back to like, now I gotta stop in the middle of my story to explain the fact that like occasionally dicks happen to fall in my mouth, like, but
Just fall right in, huh? So, I mean, we could tell fun stories for days from the trap house, but let's be clear, it wasn't all fun and games. Katie, we absolutely love you, and you know this. You were such a sweetheart when you're sober, but my God, you can be a crazy bitch. Ask
true.
Chase. We got to see her go after him with a skateboard. Luckily, we stopped her, but yeah, no, she went after him with a skateboard. It was
it's quite the vision.
things can get tense in the trap house.
Well, I mean, it was also when we was tripping acid and her and Cody didn't want to leave the hallway and their sleeping bag or their blanket or whatever they
What
were
were they
hiding
calling
under.
the backyard? The
It was
back jungle or
it was
the back
It's
forest?
the back garden.
The back garden.
It's the back garden.
Yeah.
And there was the front forest, I think it was, or something. And the pizza guy just was so confused, but
He wanted to be there.
Yeah.
He wanted to stay.
But I mean, pretty much any time you open the front door of the trap house, it's just a cloud of smoke fills the fucking cul-de-sac.
It's a cloud of smoke. You can't see through it, and as soon as it clears, the first thing you notice is the stripper pole.
Yeah, and the stripper pole in the living room. But yeah, like we'll most definitely have more stories about that, and
We'll get Katie and Chase on sometime, and
yeah, we still got
really
more.
get to chopping it up about the trap house.
Got more stories about the house on Parker with the Katie's house and so yeah, like this is basically just an introduction episode to some of that, and I do want to go on and probably in the next episode of Blunt Talk is going to be the Christmas episode, so I just want to kind of highlight some future episodes that we're going to do. But obviously this is December now, and we'll have all sorts of Christmas stuff coming up. But before that, we have our next episode of The People's History of Horror. We're going to be talking about the Gunslinger, so that'll be fun. But after that, it'll pretty much be Christmas shit through the end of the year, and then we're going to start the year strong with one of Stephen King's biggest books, The Stand. But as far as this show, Blunt Talk, obviously we wanted to discuss the holidays and stuff since we're in the middle of that.
And one more thing on the holidays that we want to do is we're gonna have a discussion about, is Gremlins a Christmas movie? So why don't y'all give us your opinions in the comments in here, hit us up on Facebook, what have you. Just let us know your opinion. To you, is Gremlins a Christmas movie?
Or Die Hard for that matter. But y'all know that conversation anyways. But
Yeah.
we're definitely going to dig into that debate. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of highlight that. But other than that, for something like this episode that we're doing now, all this stuff's going to come back like we said. But we're also going to tell more stories about, our adventures and stuff. But I kind of wanted to introduce that theme on this show of Blunt Talk is going to be a lot of the adventures that we've been on after smoking ourselves a blunt.
There have been many.
And so, yeah, since we're asking you to comment, on future episodes, comment on this episode too. Like, tell us your craziest adventure smoking a blunt. Obviously, that's a theme that's going to stick around, so it's an open invitation to all listeners at any given time. We would like to know some of y'all's crazy smoke stories, too.
Yeah, let's hear about your shenanigans.
Yeah. But I guess that's all for this episode right now. So I guess that would be it. And so keep it strange.
Signing off. Hey guys, so if you like what you're seeing here, then check out our page, like and subscribe, like this video, share. Check us out on Facebook. Anything I missed?
Yeah, I mean, we got the Strange Creation Facebook page.
Oh, I guess it should have been more specific.
That's Strange Creation Co. But then there's also the People's History of Horror podcast. And that's its own Facebook page. And soon we're going to be putting up Blunt Talk.
Oh, and your blog.
Oh, yeah, it's the People's... No, it's not. It's the Strange Creation Literary blog. And there's also, we're going to be soon bringing up an Instagram and TikTok and all the other shit, but we haven't quite got there yet.
We'll definitely be sharing those as soon as we get them.
But don't forget to go look at our Patreon page. It's patreon.com. It's Strange Creation Co. And we haven't really set up the subscription yet. We'll be doing that. And so either way, like, share, and subscribe. All of the things that we've mentioned.
Oh, and a big thanks to Laura.
And we can't forget Laura. She does all the media. Pretty much anything you see on the videos, that's all her. We're just here talking.
This would be an utter disaster without her.
Yeah. So make sure every time shout her out because she's the one that really does this. Thanks.